There's this notion that in order to make an effective horror movie, it needs plenty of gory, gruesome shots and buckets of blood. And yes, there have been a lot of great horror films where they spent a lot on red dye and corn syrup. However, that's not the only way to make a horror film that's chilling and scary and creates a reaction from the audience. For some reason, the reveal that a horror film is rated PG-13 elicits groans from some horror film fans. However, a lot of the time, when it may lack in extreme gore, the filmmakers will make up for it in other ways. And just because a film is PG-13 does not mean the filmmakers did not push the rating as far as possible. A good example is with Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell. If you've seen Raimi's previous horror films, like the Evil Dead series, he's a director with a love for over-the-top scenes full of gruesome imagery and demonic creatures popping out of the shadows to do something horrible to the characters. The Evil Dead movies were understandably rated R, but Drag Me to Hell received a PG-13. Was the film watered down from what we'd come to expect from Raimi? Absolutely not. Many of his trademark gross-out scenes were all there as he puts the main protagonist Christine through the ringer. There's even a part where she develops an intense nosebleed and they don't cut away from the incredible amount of blood that gushes out. It's a movie I'm amazed avoided they are, but credit Sam Raimi for pulling it off. For me, when I think of some of my favorite horror movies, I find one of the most effective tools is with how they utilize suspense and other filmmaking techniques to give the audience that uneasy feeling. Two horror movies of recent years I love are the Quiet Place films. Those movies use sound and the almost silent atmosphere to excellent effect in creating tension. The terror comes not when the monsters leap out and grab someone, but rather from the fear of what the sudden loud noise will bring. Almost any time something makes a noise, it elicits a gasp and the heart stops as the characters scurry to avoid being eaten. You also have something like 10 Cloverfield Lane, which makes great use of a single location. There's an uneasiness as we see how John Goodman's character tries to keep the other two protagonists locked in this bunker, and the uncertainty comes from whether what he's saying is true or if he's just paranoid. It's a movie that's further elevated by the performances, especially from Goodman and Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Something else to keep in mind is that not everyone wants to see gory imagery and would rather be scared in a different way. When I was younger, I was uncomfortable watching gory scenes, but did eventually ease into it. That leads me to my next point, that PG-13 horror movies can be a great gateway for someone to enter the genre. One of my earliest horror movie memories was Gore Verbinski's American remake of The Ring. That movie used the ticking clock of this murderous video to generate some of its scares as we await what happens when the 7 days are up. Verbinski opted for a chilly vibe to create that creepy atmosphere, and that certainly left an impression on my younger self. And then when we see Samara walk out of the television set and move towards one of her victims, it certainly creeped me out. Just the idea of this entity crawling out was enough to imprint those images in my head for a while. I was initially averse to non-creature feature horror movies, but The Ring made me appreciate a lot more what the genre was capable of. You also have horror films made before the implementation of the PG-13 rating and which managed to get away with a PG with their scares. With Jaws, Steven Spielberg succeeded in scaring the audience with his mostly off-screen shark, but there are nonetheless a number of bloody scenes in the film, most famously the deaths of Alex Kintner and Quint. However, what made Jaws truly scary and frightened people off the beaches during the summer of 1975 was the way we saw the point of view of the shark combined with John Williams' excellent two-note theme as it builds and builds. Jaws, by the way, is rated PG, although it would definitely be PG-13 by today's standards. Poltergeist is another PG-rated film which crafted several heart-pounding scenes involving this family dealing with spirits in their home. The intensity of the film actually resulted in originally receiving an R rating from the MPAA, but Tobe Hooper and Spielberg were able to appeal it down to a PG. One of the movies that resulted in the creation of PG-13 was the horror comedy Gremlins. Released with a PG, Gremlins was aiming more for comedy than scares, but Joe Dante still presented some scenes that pushed what he could do with the rating, like a moment where a gremlin explodes in a microwave. The violence in Gremlins is interesting because it's definitely higher than what we expect from a PG movie, but not even close to the level of R. Hence Spielberg's suggestion that a rating somewhere in the middle be created. John Carpenter's Halloween is another interesting case because it's rated R, but not because of gore. There's actually very little blood in the movie, with it getting that rating more for sex and nudity. The violence is mostly PG-13 by today's standards, but Carpenter nonetheless created something with the right chilling effect as Michael Myers makes his way to his various victims and we worry for Laurie Strode and the other characters' safety. This came out of Carpenter not wanting to make a typical horror movie that relied on blood, and executive producer Irwin Yablans wanting Halloween to have more the feel of a radio play that scares the audience through suspense and their own imagination. Halloween is rightfully regarded as one of the best horror films of all time, and it's partly because of this restraint on the filmmaker's part. One reason I was not a fan of Halloween 2 was because it became more about shocking the audience with gory kills, born out of Carpenter wanting to compete with the crop of slasher films like Friday the 13th, which had been released in the wake of the first movie, but I think it resulted in something not nearly as effective. Are there horror movies where going for something gorier helped the film and made it more memorable? Absolutely. The 1982 version of The Thing made an impact thanks to the gruesome violence exhibited by the alien. John Carpenter still devised some tense scenes as the characters wonder who among them is really this creature who can infect anyone and take any form. But he and special makeup effects designer Rob Bottin also crafted a lot of memorable scenes of the alien causing a lot of damage on these men. One reason for the movie's lasting appeal is the out-there imagery, which admittedly could only been accomplished with its more restrictive rating. So don't mistake this video for me saying gory scenes in horror movies can't be great. It's all about execution after all. However, there are also cases where going for the R rating does not help the film in any way. I remember what a big deal it was that The Happening was M. Night Shyamalan's first R-rated movie. Now he was taking his scares to the next level and was going to give the audience some truly bloody imagery. And in the end, The Happening and its attempts at scaring the audience turned out to be incredibly silly. The Sixth Sense and The Village may have been rated PG-13, but Shyamalan was still able to create some chilling scenes that also relied on our imagination. The Happening showed more blood spurts, but that did not improve the film's many ridiculous moments. Now, you do have cases where the studio demands an R-rated horror film be recut to earn a PG-13. There's certainly times when it's obvious, and I imagine it's frustrating for the filmmakers who had a specific vision in mind before they were required to tone it down. I would also completely understand if fans of Freddy, Jason, and Jigsaw reacted in disappointment if it's ever revealed a new film with those slasher villains was released with a PG-13. However, there have also been a few cases where opting for the less restrictive rating did not hurt the film that much. A recent example was with this year's horror hit Megan, which was originally written with an R in mind. It was even filmed with the expectation that it would receive that rating, but Universal asked the filmmakers if they could target a PG-13 instead, so a few scenes were reshot and a few cuts were made. And in the end, the director, Gerald Johnstone, revealed he thought the theatrical cut was more effective, as he found using certain sound effects was more powerful than showing blood spraying out of one of Megan's victims. The Blu-ray does include a slightly harsher version of the film, which is surprisingly 6 seconds shorter. As interesting as it is to see the gorier scenes, and one moment with an ear is especially gruesome, cutting and altering them hardly hurt the movie's quality. Part of the fun of Megan was how delightfully and intentionally absurd it was, and that still comes through in the PG-13 cut. To conclude, I don't think PG-13 films deserve the stigma they occasionally receive from horror fans. While grotesque and extra bloody scenes certainly make an impact, it's not the only way to tell a scary story. See you next time.